Welcome to the Mojo Movie Podcast, where it's all about magic, manifesting, and movement. I'm Ginny Watts, the Dancing Witch, and we are embarking on a journey with Goldilocks and the three manifestations. In our time together, we have been exploring a multitude of ways to interact with elemental and celestial energies in the body and the physical world to deepen our experience along the path of spirit and manifestation. The biggest challenge to experiencing spirit and magic in the physical world actually comes not from the body, but from the brain. Movement, song, meditation, breathwork, and restructuring thoughts and beliefs are all avenues we have explored to help shift our thoughts in order to change our vibration. Stories are another powerful, ubiquitous tool used by humans to make the spirit world, the realm of magic, accessible for us brain-bound hominini. Let's dive into the transformational power of story. The fairy tale Goldilocks and the Three Bears has been in print for 195 years. However, it was a common story in the oral tradition of Britain prior to its being written down. It also bears, pun intended, a strong resemblance to folk tales from Norway and Romania. The version with which most of us are familiar is about 108 years old and is the version we are focusing on. You may remember that Goldilocks goes for a walk in the woods and discovers a cabin with an unlocked front door. Unbeknownst to Goldilocks, this cabin belongs to three bears, Papa, Mama, and Baby Bear, who are out for their morning stroll while their breakfast porridge cools. Goldilocks boldly enters the empty cabin and promptly helps herself to the furniture, the porridge, and the beds of the unsuspecting bears. The bears return home from their stroll to discover their furniture mauled, their food mooched, and their beds rumpled. They also find Goldilocks, fast asleep in Baby Bear's bed. Goldilocks wakes at the sound of the bears' conversation and bolts down the stairs and out the front door, never to be seen again. This tale was originally intended and interpreted as a cautionary tale about boundaries, respect, balance, and proper behavior for young ladies. It is also a warning about straying into the unknown, the foreign, the wild. Like all powerful folk tales, however, we can find many nuances and possible interpretations to the story. For example, isn't it interesting that Goldilocks appears innocent and safe? Petite, young, female, with well-groomed hair. She is the epitome of civilization, in appearance. The bears, on the other hand, are superficially terrifying and wild, yet the behaviors of the characters run exactly the opposite. Things are not always what they appear. How we perceive ourselves and others is based on our frequently limited or erroneous beliefs. Another intriguing element of the story is that the bears are creatures of habit, doing what we assume must be a sort of morning ritual, leaving their house unattended and unlocked for a casual stroll. Goldilocks, on the other hand, is bold, wily, adventurous, and operating wholly outside of the accepted, the routine, the predictable. Staying in a rut doesn't always keep us safe. Straying from the path may be scary, but it isn't necessarily deadly. Change and growth occur when we step out of comfort and into risk, when we allow the unknown to invite us across the threshold. This narrative is more than a cautionary tale for Victorian children or Gen Alphas. It is an ancient spirit story. The repetitive appearance of the number 3 is a powerful invocation of sacred geometry. The house in the woods is an integral element in myths, teaching stories, and allegories across many cultures and traditions. The unlocked door to a forbidden room or building is yet another motif with ancient origins. The thief, the hungry wayfarer, and so many other symbols in this little story are traditions that appear in the lore of indigenous cultures and ancient civilizations across every continent. The last thing I want to point out is that every character in this tale has an opportunity to learn, to expand, to know themselves and others more deeply and truly. Even the furniture, the dishes, the house, the door, and the food are vital metaphors in this profound and simple text. This isn't just about Goldilocks. It's about relationship among all creatures, all things, animate and inanimate. Now I'd like to share 3 tales of my own. Each tale describes a path of manifesting with unique twists and turns, unique outcomes, and unique consequences. My stories are The Tale of the Neighbor, The Saga of the Doctor, and the legend of the husband, the bear, and the bird. The tale of the neighbor begins in the depths of Biden's presidency. Each day on my drive home from work through semi-rural countryside with the entire stretch of the Bridger Mountain Range laid out in undulating grandeur before me, I passed a house in a neighboring subdivision that sat at a crossroads. The property was festooned with a multitude of standards, the largest of which proclaimed MAGA country over a huge gateway made of 3 logs, the 2 legs and the crosspiece of the gateway, that were in essence the entire trunks of 3 large conifers. Other flags, including vitriolic insults and profanity, appeared in an ever-changing rotation at various points on the house, the yard fence, and the assorted machinery in the expansive driveway. I had a daily invitation to practice allowing. What could that possibly look like? One afternoon, I spoke to my deities. This was my request. May things shift enough for me to pass this place with peace in my heart and allowing this homeowner to be completely who he is. May I find the wisdom to honor the contrast while being true to myself, my soul, my wisdom. A few days later, I passed the house and there flew a flag reading, "Let's go, Brandon." Now, to help you understand where I was, I don't read newspapers or news feeds or watch the news on TV or the internet or listen to the news on the radio. All the headlines still reach me eventually in various forms, one way or another. As I passed the house and saw the flag, my thought was, wow, I don't know who Brandon is, but hey, at least it's a positive message. Okay, there's more. I called my friend Galen and told her about the event. She listened and said she was glad that I felt better. I also happily shared this manifestation with the rest of my bandmates the next morning, with Galen looking on. I thought she had a bit of an odd expression. In fact, all 3 women smiled gently at me. Galen later called and told me the origin of the phrase, "Let's go, Brandon." I had to laugh, but it wasn't out of feeling stupid. I actually felt surprise and delight. Let me take you deeper into my experience. Here is what I shared with my bandmates at our next rehearsal. I asked to manifest a situation where I could feel positive when faced with intense contrast. I asked for the contrast to shift just enough for me to find a way through. I could easily match my vibration to that request. I knew a shift would help, though I didn't have any idea how that could possibly happen. I had 0 expectations that it would happen anytime soon. I also didn't have a huge investment in it happening. It would be nice, and I would also survive even if I spent every drive home struggling through judgment and righteousness to find equanimity. And I didn't have to. I sent my intention out, and what I asked for was exactly what happened. In a matter of days, the message changed. By the time I understood the message from MAGA country's perspective, my internal experience had shifted to a whole new vibration. In the intervening years, I seldom pass that house without smiling or giggling, and each time I pass, I nod to my deities, to my capital S self. That process was truly magic for me. I find that when I get a clear message from deity, it almost always has a surprising, humorous, and personal twist to it. Something that joyfully says, "This is from us to you because we love you just as you are." The Saga of the Doctor. I have been struggling with a chronic injury to my knee. Like many dancers, many athletes, many humans, I have plowed on, unwilling to bow to pain or give up my to-do list or the things that I enjoy. And like many dancers, many athletes, many humans, I had to bow to the wisdom of Kramer. I don't argue with the body, Jerry. That's an argument you can't win. Too true. I ended up going in to see my PCP, my primary care physician, who is amazing. Dr. Shalou is fantastic and patient and knowledgeable and empowering. Eventually, I got an X-ray and an MRI and accepted a referral to a specialist, but I wasn't happy about it. I have had or been privy to a lot of bad experiences with mainstream medicine. A lot of them were annoying, and a concerning number were harmful in one way or another. Yet, here I was. I attempted to find a doctor I thought would be most like my PCP, or so I told myself. Interestingly, as I trotted down the path of manifesting, instead of focusing on the characteristics of Dr. Shalou, I focused on all the past interactions I had that were negative and painful and damaging. My focus was on the details of this bad thing that happened. Oh, and I want someone like Dr. Shalou. Then my focus would shift to this hostile interaction. And I want someone like Dr. Shalou. I was very clear on the specifics of what I didn't like about my experiences in modern medicine. I was very vague about the many sterling virtues and assets of Dr. Shalou. I brought my struggles to friends, groups, and to my deities. I found a friend who recommended an osteopath, and I began to feel hopeful. When I contacted the office with a referral to the osteopath, I was informed that wasn't how it was done. I would see a DNP, a doctor of nursing practice, but not the doctor I was referred to. I didn't like that. I continued to play negative scenarios over in my head, anticipating further frustration. Then I would speak to a group of my amazing spiritual buddies and receive wonderful encouragement. I would feel uplifted and move toward envisioning positive experiences, only to slide back into the past. The morning of my initial appointment, I set out this intention in a morning manifesting group I meet with. Today, my experience will be at least neutral, and regardless of what transpires, I will come out of the appointment with new information to guide my next steps. I could align with that. I think a wet noodle could just about align with that. At least I figured it was a shift away from the negative spiral of the previous 2 weeks. I arrived at the office and found the staff to be pleasant and professional. I went in with the doctor and told him my situation. I had looked at my x-ray with Dr. Shalou, but hadn't been into her office to look at the MRI. I asked if I could see the MRI, but the DNP said I wouldn't be able to understand what I was seeing. Turns out, knees are complicated. He also said he was a spine doctor. He could tell me exactly what the MRI of a spine was showing, but he would be hard put to explain an MRI of a knee. He did take out a 3D model of a knee to help me picture how I wanted to envision my healing ligaments, though he didn't correctly identify one of the ligaments that was listed in the results of my MRI. He was polite, respectful, honest, and professional in his demeanor. He moved my knee around to check its stability, and he was able to explain why bracing a bilateral injury doesn't work. He gave me a specific timeline for healing this particular chronic injury. He prescribed the standard first stage of treatment for torn connective tissue, including rice, NSAIDs, and a referral to PT. His recommendations were just what Dr. Shalou initially suggested, except he provided a time estimate. I suspect the doctor I had hoped to meet with counseled for a standard approach before moving forward. However, I was already trying the standard approach, and both Dr. Shalou and I were hoping for clarity on whether this issue that had lasted almost 6 months might need something more. I guess it didn't. As I walked to my car, my morning intention arose in my thoughts. Today, my experience will be at least neutral, and regardless of what transpires, I will come out of this appointment with new information to guide my next steps. Again, I had to laugh. In fact, I sat in my car and laughed for a while. I got exactly what I put forth in my intention. Here was another funny, gentle, loving message from my deities. Maybe you would like to be a little more specific about what you really want instead of what you really don't want. I had a very tangible, conscious, visceral experience of the power of intentional manifestation formed in the context of tenacious, limiting beliefs. This time, I recognized that the outcome was not proof of the truth of the limiting beliefs, but rather a reflection of the power of beliefs, true or not. The same day as my visit with the DNP, I needed to find a physical therapist to whom I would be referred. The first thing I did was to picture and say out loud what I wanted the PT and the therapy experience to be. I was clear on the characteristics. I could feel the emotions that would arise working with someone I trusted and respected and who trusted and respected me. I thought back over my specific experiences with Dr. Shalou and even found my way back to a past chiropractor/PT/sports kinesiologist who was an amazing healer, combining Eastern and Western medicine and traditional and current techniques. Only then did I go looking for a physical therapist, and through a number of gentle synchronicities, I found my way to Hannah. Let me just say, she's great. She's everything I intended her to be, and more. And my healing has accelerated noticeably. I am starting to take short walks, dance for a few songs, and sit cross-legged with minimal support for my knee. In this case, choosing to go for a neutral vibration allowed me to remember I could change my experience with very little effort. The neutral manifestation inspired some invested intention setting, and that's when the real magic kicked in. The husband, the bear, and the bird. For those of us who live near Yellowstone National Park, fall and spring are the best times to visit this magnificent wonderland. Despite the chances of encountering harsh winter-like weather in either season, the opportunity to explore the park with fewer tourists, we consider ourselves locals if there is such a thing in the wilds, is incentive enough to beckon us to this iconic global monument. My husband, Ron, and I often make our way to the park in the shoulder seasons to enjoy some quiet repose on beloved sacred ground. Yellowstone, the park and the greater Yellowstone ecosystem, is my Mecca. It has been a consistent presence for me, a magnificent, untamable sacred ground that I have returned to every year of my life. I was born in Billings, less than 3 hours from the northeast entrance to the park. In 1959, a month before my 3rd birthday, my family and I rode out the massive 7.2 Hebgen Lake earthquake in our family housing bungalow on the Montana State College campus, barely 100 miles from the epicenter, which was located just outside the western boundary of Yellowstone Park. I have always known Yellowstone, wild and powerful, awe-inspiring and breathtaking. Through my childhood, my family visited Yellowstone Park at least once a year. Even after we moved to California, we returned to Montana in August every year and either stayed in the park on the way into or the way out of Montana. Since getting together shortly after my 18th birthday, Ron and I have done the same, and my boys grew up exploring the greater Yellowstone ecosystem and Yellowstone Park. When I am in the park, that's how we refer to Yellowstone, I can feel its powerful, throbbing heart like a deep vibration in my own body. Yellowstone Lake is that heart. About 10 years ago, Ron and I made an excursion into the park in the first week of October. I really wanted to see the birds migrating south for the winter. Pelican Creek Nature Trail, situated on the north shore of Yellowstone Lake, is a prime spot for birding in September and October. Despite the fact that we had decided to cut our trip short in the face of a nasty turn in the weather, which brought cold and blowing sleet and snow, I was determined to make the trek down the trail to the lake shore to look for birds. Ron was a saint and agreed to drive from Old Faithful over the pass to the north shore of the lake before heading out through Mammoth to go home. We crossed Fishing Bridge, where the Yellowstone River flows sedately out of Yellowstone Lake on its way through Hayden Valley to the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone. Its surface looked smooth and almost black under the pewter sky. As we pulled into the small parking area, I could see the bright yellow signs proclaiming, "Danger! Bear frequenting area." Ron expressed his regret on my behalf and started to step back into the car. I was adamant. We'd come all this way, the area wasn't closed, and I wanted to see a migrating bird. Ron grabbed his video camera and followed down the trail. I need to pause here and let you know how incredibly foolish I was being, not to mention really disrespectful of the bears. And by bears, I mean grizzly bears, who are common on the upper part of the Pelican Creek Trail, which begins across the road from the parking area and leads into some of the most remote and wild parts of the park. But we were heading in the opposite direction, toward the shore of the lake. It wasn't that far, right? The trail immediately led into classic Yellowstone country. Dense lodgepole pine forest with an equally dense undergrowth, including juniper, chokecherries, serviceberries, and wild rose laden with bright red rose hips. Bears rely on these berries to help them put on the fat that will allow them to survive the long, harsh winters in the park. In the trees, I immediately felt my crankiness subside, replaced by the enigmatic, energetic calm I always feel when I'm in Yellowstone. We were sheltered from the wind, and though we were the only humans in the area, the surrounding woods felt very inhabited. The spirits of the plants, the animals, the lake, the stream, and the volcanic mass below were palpable. The trail was soft, well-worn, and narrow, so Ron walked behind me, filming our progress. We talked loudly enough to make sure we didn't surprise any bears. On both sides of the trail, visibility was only a matter of feet because of the crowded lodgepoles and the lush undergrowth. Suddenly, in the midst of our conversation, we heard a woof that was caught on the camera audio. We both stopped dead in our tracks and simultaneously asked, "What was that?" We knew what it was. It was a grizzly bear huff. It is the only time I've heard that sound in the wild, and it is the bear's way of saying, "You don't belong here." We stood frozen, talking quietly, straining our eyes to see if we could spot where he was in relation to us. I say he because if it had been a sow bear, I don't know that I would be here talking to you about the encounter. The next sound we heard sealed the deal. It was the sound of jaw popping, also known as teeth clacking, and often accompanies huffing. The grizzly was saying, "If you still aren't sure, let me make it clear. You need to leave." We promptly backed a ways down the trail and then turned and walked briskly back to the car. Was I relieved that we had not been attacked by a bear, which would likely have ended not only in my death, but in the deaths of the unfortunate bear and my unfortunate husband? Was I humbled by the interaction? Nope. I was stuck on what I didn't get to do. Ron was totally sympathetic and encouraged me not to give up. We drove further east along the shore of the lake until we reached the narrow stretch of sand that ran along the edge of Mary Bay. We drove onto the sand and looked out over the violently rolling surface of the water, which had been whipped into waves by the powerful winds that buffeted and shook our van. As I stared to the west, I suddenly noticed 5 or 6 birds flying into the air above the frothing waves, pausing momentarily, and then dive-bombing headfirst into the water. I was fascinated. I grabbed the binoculars and looked as closely as I could to identify them. They were white, with a dark head, a visible red-orange bill, and black-tipped wings. But I couldn't find them in any of my bird ID books. After a half hour or so, it was time to make our way home. But first, I asked if we could stop at the Fishing Bridge Visitor Center so I could ask the rangers there about the birds. Ron, of course, happily agreed. I bounded out of the car and into the building as soon as the car stopped moving. I was already at the desk in the midst of my bird description when Ron arrived. The rangers were unable to tell me what I had seen. I went into the bookstore at the east end of the building, telling Ron that if I found a bird book that helped me ID these amazing birds, I was going to buy it on the spot. I was immediately drawn to the Sibley Field Guide to Birds, a classic, as it turns out. There on page 202 was the Caspian tern. I took the book to the rangers, and they agreed it matched my description to a T. They also asked me if I would be willing to fill out a Yellowstone National Park rare bird observation form. I'm a bird nerd. Of course I said yes, and I was thrilled. As we strode out to the van, I felt the full magic of the last few hours. How had I manifested such an incredible series of events? In this case, I had help. A lot of help, and I needed it. I had a companion who loved me, just as I am, who was willing to walk the path with me, and who lent the full weight of his laser-focused visualizing to my heartfelt wish to see a ding-dang migratory bird on the north shore of Yellowstone Lake. When you have a partner with those mad skills, well, of course magic happens. When we tell our manifesting tales, or better still, when we write them down, we can take a step back and see the full process, recognize the subtle details. We give ourselves the opportunity to pick up communications from deity that we missed in the now of the process. We see the way the details of manifestations match word for word with our intentions, for better or worse. We discover synchronicities, sacred geometry and numerology, symbols and puns and metaphors that we often witness only in dreams. We record our words and emotions in tandem with the events so that we may use our stories to help us sidestep the practices that bring exactly what we ask for, but not what we want. We spin our yarns to relive those word emotion event weaves that evoke the vibration we need to manifest our heart's desires. We lovingly honor ourselves by recognizing that our stories are sacred. What are your manifesting stories? What magic do you have to share? If you are uncertain what stories you have to tell, a skilled witness can help by getting curious about your experiences, highlighting details and links you may be too close to recognize, observing from an outside perspective. I can support you in revealing your powerful wisdom tales. Connect with me via my website or email, or on Facebook at Caravan of Dreams MT. Our music is used by permission of the artist, Sean Phoenix. Thank you, Sean. And thank you to Bozeman Public Library for the Workbench Sound Studio located in beautiful downtown Bozeman, Montana. If you would like to learn more about allowing and how to find your unique style of manifesting, please visit my website, caravanofdreamsmt.com, or email me at dancingwitchmt@gmail.com. This is Ginny Watts, the Dancing Witch. Till next time, blessed be.